In every era, human progress has been driven not only by ideas, but by the ability to communicate them. We live, love, lead, and learn through words. Yet, in a world overflowing with noise, few people ever stop to consider whether they truly know how to speak so that others listen, or how to listen so that others feel heard. Mortimer J. Adler's How to Speak, How to Listen is a timeless guide that bridges this gap. Written in 1983, it remains as relevant today as ever, for it addresses something fundamental to all human relationships: the art of meaningful communication. The importance of this book cannot be overstated. Speaking and listening are the two most common activities in our daily lives, and yet they are also the most neglected. Schools teach us to read and write, but rarely do they teach us to converse with clarity, to persuade with integrity, or to listen with depth. Adler challenges this neglect. He shows us that speaking is not about dazzling others with clever words, and listening is not about waiting for our turn to reply. Both are skills, disciplines, that can be cultivated to enrich our personal lives, elevate our careers, and strengthen our communities. In a society where disagreements often turn into shouting matches, and where conversations are reduced to sound bites and tweets, Adler's work is a call to sanity. It reminds us that communication is not a battlefield. It is a bridge. And if we can learn to cross that bridge with respect, logic, and empathy, we can transform not only our conversations, but also our relationships and our lives. To fully appreciate the wisdom of this book, one must understand the man behind it, Mortimer J. Adler. Born in 1902 in New York City, Adler grew up in a modest family and dropped out of high school at age 14. Far from being the end of his education, this became the beginning of his lifelong pursuit of knowledge. He educated himself voraciously, reading philosophy, literature, and science, and eventually earned his way into Columbia University. There, his brilliance and passion for the classics began to shine. Adler would go on to become one of the most influential American philosophers of the 20th century, best known for his work on the Great Books program and his belief that philosophy should be accessible to all people, not just academics. Adler was not a philosopher locked in an ivory tower. He believed that philosophy must serve everyday life, and that wisdom belongs to everyone. His conviction was simple yet radical. The ability to think, speak, and listen well is the foundation of a flourishing democracy. If people cannot express their thoughts clearly or listen to opposing views with understanding, society itself weakens. Thus, Adler saw communication not merely as a personal skill, but as a civic duty. This conviction is woven into the very purpose of How to Speak, How to Listen. The book is not a shallow manual of tips and tricks for making small talk or winning arguments. Its purpose is far more profound. Adler seeks to teach us how to communicate as rational, respectful, and compassionate human beings. He draws upon centuries of philosophy, rhetoric, and human experience to show us how speaking and listening, when done well, lead to truth, mutual understanding, and genuine connection. The purpose of the book is twofold. First, it teaches us to elevate our speaking, not by using bigger words or clever rhetoric, but by learning to structure our thoughts logically, express ourselves with clarity, and persuade without manipulation. Second, it calls us to master the lost art of listening, not passive listening that nods along without engagement, but active listening that seeks to understand before judging, to clarify before responding, to connect before debating. Adler understood that speaking without listening is arrogance, and listening without speaking is silence. It is only when these two arts are combined that true dialogue occurs. And in dialogue, we discover something greater than winning an argument. We discover truth, empathy, and wisdom. This is why How to Speak, How to Listen is not just a book for politicians, lawyers, or leaders. It is a book for spouses who long to understand each other more deeply, for parents who wish to guide their children wisely, for friends who want to build trust, for teachers and students who long for meaningful exchange, and for every human being who desires to live with more connection and less conflict. The true purpose of Adler's book, then, is not merely to improve communication. It is to improve humanity, one conversation at a time. Mortimer J. Adler once observed that of all the skills we use daily, none are as critical or as neglected as speaking and listening. Reading and writing may occupy our formal education, but the ability to converse, persuade, and understand is what shapes our careers, relationships, and societies. In How to Speak, How to Listen, Adler brings these arts back to the forefront. His insights are not rules for polite conversation, but blueprints for building meaningful human connection. Let us explore the lessons of this remarkable book, not as abstract theory, but as practices you can begin to live today. Lesson 1. Clarity is the soul of speaking. Adler begins with a truth as simple as it is profound. To speak well, you must first think well. Speaking is the external expression of internal thought, and if your thinking is confused, your words will be too. Clarity is the soul of communication. Application. Before speaking, ask yourself, what exactly am I trying to say? Reduce your message to its essence. Avoid unnecessary jargon or complicated phrasing. Whether you are giving a presentation at work or explaining a lesson to a child, the goal is not to impress with complexity, but to enlighten with clarity. Illustration. Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address lasted less than 3 minutes, yet its clarity and simplicity have echoed across generations. Lincoln's genius was not in length, but in precision. Every word chosen, every phrase sharp. Lesson 2. Persuasion requires both logic and emotion. Adler reminds us that persuasion is not manipulation. True persuasion balances logic and emotion. Facts alone may not move people, and emotions without reasoning can mislead. But when reason and feeling unite, they inspire action. Application. In conversation or public speaking, present clear evidence, but also speak to the heart. A leader motivating a team must share the numbers that prove success is possible, while also painting a vision that ignites passion. A teacher must provide facts, but deliver them in a way that stirs curiosity. Illustration. Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech embodies this principle. He grounded his vision in the logic of the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, but he also painted an emotional picture of children playing together in freedom. The combination of logic and emotion made his words unforgettable. Lesson 3. Listening is more than hearing. One of Adler's boldest assertions is that listening is an act of art. To merely hear words is passive. To truly listen is to engage with them, to seek meaning, and to understand the speaker's intent. Listening requires focus, patience, and humility. Application. When listening, discipline yourself to set aside distractions, not only physical ones like phones, but also mental ones like planning your response. Summarize what the other person has said to confirm your understanding before replying. This practice not only ensures accuracy, but also shows respect. Illustration. Consider how therapists listen to their clients. A good therapist does not simply nod along. They actively listen, reflect back, and ask clarifying questions. This kind of listening heals because it makes the speaker feel deeply understood. Lesson 4. Dialogue is the highest form of communication. Adler distinguishes between debate, discussion, and dialogue. Debate is about winning. Discussion is about sharing ideas. Dialogue, however, is about discovery. Two minds working together to reach truth. Application. Strive for dialogue in your relationships. Instead of arguing to prove yourself right, approach conversations with curiosity. Ask, what can I learn from this person? What truth can we uncover together? This mindset transforms conflict into collaboration. Illustration. Socrates, the father of Western philosophy, used dialogue as his primary tool of teaching. Through questions and conversation, he led others to examine their assumptions and discover truth for themselves. His method lives on today as the Socratic dialogue. Lesson 5. Listening to learn, listening to understand, listening to enjoy. Adler identifies different levels of listening. Sometimes we listen to learn new information. Other times we listen to understand another's feelings or perspective. And sometimes we listen simply for the joy of it, as in music or storytelling. Each level requires a different kind of attention. Application. Be conscious of why you are listening. If you are listening to a colleague's instructions, focus on accuracy. If you are listening to a friend share their struggles, focus on empathy. If you are listening to music or poetry, allow yourself to savor the experience. Adjust your listening to the purpose. Illustration. Imagine a parent reading a bedtime story to their child. The child is not listening to gather information. They are listening to enjoy, to connect, to feel wonder. That joy creates memories that last a lifetime. Lesson 6. Speaking to inform versus speaking to motivate. Adler draws a critical distinction between informative speaking and motivational speaking. Speaking to inform conveys knowledge. Speaking to motivate inspires action. Both are essential, but each requires a different approach. Application. In business, if you are training employees, your focus is clarity and structure, informative speaking. If you are rallying them to achieve a goal, your focus is vision and passion, motivational speaking. Learn to recognize which mode is needed and adapt accordingly. Illustration. Consider John F. Kennedy's challenge. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. This was not informative speaking. It was motivational speaking at its finest. Lesson 7. The discipline of silence. Paradoxically, one of Adler's greatest lessons about speaking is the value of silence. To speak well, one must also know when not to speak. Silence creates space for reflection, for listening, and for words to carry greater weight when finally spoken. Application. Practice the pause. Before responding in conversation, take a breath. Use silence to emphasize a point in public speaking. Allow others to fill the space, and you may discover truths you would have missed by rushing in. Illustration. The best comedians understand this principle. Timing and pauses often make the difference between a laugh and a missed punchline. Similarly, in leadership, a thoughtful pause can command more respect than a hurried answer. Lesson 8. The moral responsibility of communication. Adler emphasizes that with the power to influence comes responsibility. Words can heal or harm, build or destroy. To speak and listen well is not merely a skill, but a moral duty. Application. Before speaking, ask, will my words build up or tear down? Will they bring truth or confusion? When listening, ask, am I seeking to understand or just to attack? Integrity in communication strengthens trust in every relationship. Illustration. Think of leaders who misused words to deceive. History shows the destruction that follows. Contrast this with leaders like Winston Churchill, whose words during World War II gave hope to millions in their darkest hour. The moral weight of communication cannot be underestimated. Lesson 9. Communication as the foundation of democracy. For Adler, communication was not just personal, it was civic. A healthy democracy requires citizens who can express their views clearly, listen to opposing ideas respectfully, and seek truth through dialogue. Without these skills, societies fracture. Application. In your workplace, family, or community, encourage open dialogue. Create environments where differing opinions can be shared without hostility. Practice listening not only to those you agree with, but also to those you disagree with. This strengthens both relationships and communities. Illustration. Consider the debates that shaped the founding of the United States. Leaders like Madison, Jefferson, and Hamilton disagreed passionately, but through communication and compromise, they built a constitution that has endured for centuries. Lesson 10. Communication as a path to human flourishing. The heart of Adler's philosophy is the belief that communication is essential for living a full, meaningful life. To speak well is to share your thoughts with the world. To listen well is to allow the world to enrich your thoughts. Together, they create a cycle of growth, connection, and fulfillment. Application. Approach every conversation as an opportunity for growth. Speak with honesty, clarity, and kindness. Listen with openness, patience, and empathy. Let communication be not just a tool, but a way of living. Illustration. Think of the friendships, marriages, and communities that thrive, not because conflict never arises, but because communication is strong enough to navigate it. When people truly speak and listen, bonds deepen and lives are transformed. These lessons are not mere suggestions. They are habits to be cultivated, disciplines to be practiced. Speaking and listening well require effort, but they yield rewards beyond measure, stronger relationships, wiser decisions, and a life of greater connection and meaning. Adler's brilliance was not in inventing new tricks, but in reminding us of timeless truths, that words matter, that silence matters, that listening matters, and that how we communicate shapes who we become. When Mortimer J. Adler wrote How to Speak, How to Listen, he did not intend to give us a set of polished techniques for clever conversation. He intended to restore dignity to human communication itself. For Adler, to speak and listen well is not simply a skill. It is a way of living, a way of respecting truth, and a way of honoring the humanity in others. The final takeaway of this book is clear. Words are not just sounds. They are bridges. Every time you open your mouth to speak, you are building a bridge between your inner world and the outer world. Every time you open your ears to listen, you are allowing another person's world to enrich your own. Without these bridges, we live in isolation. With them, we live in connection, understanding, and shared growth. Think of the conversations that have shaped your life, the teacher who encouraged you, the friend who truly listened, the leader who inspired you. None of those moments were accidents. They were born of deliberate speaking and attentive listening. Now imagine if you chose to live with that same intention every day. How many lives could you touch? How many conflicts could you resolve? How much joy and wisdom could you bring into the world? Adler challenges us to rise above the shallow noise of modern communication and rediscover dialogue, conversation that seeks truth rather than victory, understanding rather than dominance. He calls us to humility, reminding us that no one has all the answers, and that listening is often the greater act of wisdom than speaking. And he reminds us that to speak well is to respect others enough to be clear, honest, and persuasive without manipulation. The transformation begins not tomorrow, but today. Start by pausing before you speak, asking yourself, am I clear? Am I kind? Am I truthful? Start by listening with fresh ears, not preparing your reply, but giving full attention. Start by seeking dialogue, not debate, by aiming to discover Tug. If we all lived by Adler's wisdom, our families would feel more connected, our workplaces more collaborative, our communities more united, and our world more humane. For in the end, communication is not just about words, it is about life itself. Because how we speak and how we listen determines how we love, how we lead, and how we leave our mark on the world. So take this book not as a relic of philosophy, but as a roadmap for daily living. Let your speech be a gift, your listening a sanctuary, and your conversations a pathway to truth. In doing so, you will not only transform your own life, you will transform the lives of those around you. Subscribe to Awaken Greatness for more inspiring lessons, and comment below to share your thoughts.